So I had a really great match in the Limited 1 event that Master Duel is hosting recently. So I wanted to share that match with you guys. And I'm going to warn you that this match is quite long. I know the matches that I've hosted on this channel have been fairly short matches, but this one is much longer. So if that's the kind of match that you're interested in seeing, feel free to stick around and just enjoy the match. Now, I just want to make clear really quick for those of you that don't know, the Limit 1 event, as its namesake implies, is you can only include one copy of each card in your deck. So for example, if you look at my opening hand here, I've got Ray, Rose, Afterburners, Widow Anchor, and Droplet. So I don't have 3 copies or even 2 copies of any of those in my deck. I can only play 1 copy maximum, so I only have access to 1 Ray and 1 Rose and all that stuff. That applies to the extra deck as well. And this applies for every card in game, which is why the event is referred to as Highlander by some people that have played other card games. The only cards that this doesn't apply to are cards that are forbidden because they're considered to be too strong, such as Crystron, Halqifibrax, and True King of All Calamities. Those are cards that aren't on the standard ban list, but they are on the ban list for this event. So anyway, my opponent is playing a deck that's a mishmash of Shaddoll, Despia, and Zoodiac cards, while I'm playing... I mean, obviously you guys know I always play Sky Strikers, but I'm also playing the Invoked engine along with Sky Strikers in this particular deck. So let's go ahead and enjoy the replay. Oh, and I'm going second, by the way, in case that wasn't immediately obvious. Okay, so my opponent starts off and they set 2 cards. So my immediate assumption is that it's either somebody playing some kind of jank deck that just sets a weak monster on a back row and passes, or it's Shaddolls. So let's see what happens. Alright, so it's my turn. So we top deck Terraform, which is pretty good. I decide to normal summon Ray to feel things out. And my opponent has a Solemn. So we normal summon Ray into a Solemn. That's a pretty bad situation for us, but luckily we have some cards to set. So I decide to use Terraforming as well, feel out if the guy has Ash. He doesn't have Ash, so we add Magical Meltdown, and then we add Alistair the Invoker to the hand. We set a back row, and then we decide to pass. I don't set the Droplet because in case my opponent has Lightning Storm or something, I want to be able to have a card in my hand that I can use for effect negation later. I don't want to risk losing all my back row to a back row wipe here because it's the early game. Okay, so my opponent draws a card for their turn. They activate the Shaddoll Hedgehog effect after flipping him up, so he's able to add a Shaddoll spell trap from his deck to his hand. I want to stop this because it allows him to add Shaddoll Fusion or Shaddoll Schism, and Schism is an extremely powerful card, especially in the Highlander event. So I chained the Widow Anchor that I have set to try and stop it, but unfortunately for us, he has El Shaddoll Fusion in his hand, and he chains that, allows him to Fusion Summon a Shaddoll Fusion monster. So by doing this, he dodges my Widow Anchor negate and is able to successfully get a search. He sends Psyframe Gear Gamma, so we know that he has Gamma, but since everything is Highlander, we know that he doesn't have access to Gamma anymore, which is great for us, because that's a very dangerous hand trap in this format. So he goes for Construct, he adds the Schism to the hand, which is what we really feared, uses Construct to send Neo Shaddoll Ariel, and then he banishes our 3 cards. Now this is terrible for us, it's pretty much the worst case scenario, because we lose 2 spells in the grave, which we really needed. We lose access to our Widow Anchor, recycling, we lose access to our Ray, because she got banished. Now, we do have some ways to recover her in this deck, but I pretty much have to hard draw them. So it's going to be tough for us to follow up. So he goes in with El Shaddoll Construct, and we take 2800. Okay, so we top deck the Lightning Storm, so we can get rid of his Schism, but the problem is we have Magical Meltdown face up on our field, so we cannot use Lightning Storm when we have a card face up. So we have to do something about that. First thing we do is activate Afterburners, because I want to try and force out a Schism activation. And my opponent does chain. They do go for the Shaddoll Schism, and go for a Winda. This is pretty bad for us because Sky Strikers cannot play very well through Winda. I mean, they can play into it, but you can't... It's like trying to play through Max C. Like, you can't make the plays that you would want to play when Winda's out. You would want to make when Winda's out. Okay, so we activate Forbidden Drop in the main phase, get rid of our Magical Meltdown so that we have access to Lightning Storm. I'm not going to bother Lightning Storming right away, though, because if we destroy his Winda, he can just add the Schism back to his hand. So it's pointless to use Lightning Storm here. We're just going to save it for later. The reason I use Droplet is so that I can get Winda down to 1100 attacks so that I can beat over it. Because the only Shaddoll spell and trap that he has in his graveyard is El Shaddoll Fusion. So if he adds that, it's not that big of a deal. It's much better for him to add this to his hand than it is to add Schism to the hand. Okay, so fortunately for us, we had a Ray and a Rose in the opening hand, so we're able to go into Hayate. Then we swing into his window. We send an Engage because we want to start trying to make some plays with Engage and get some defense up. He does add the El Shaddoll Fusion as predicted. So we go into Kagari. Add the Engage to the hand. Activate Engage. Add a multi-roll so that we can get some recycling started. That also allows us to draw up Pankratops, which is good. Activate the multi-roll. We're going to add a Shark Cannon, and then we're immediately going to use the Shark Cannon. We're going to get rid of his window so he doesn't have access to it anymore. Activate multi-roll, add the Shark Cannon back to the field. Now we decided to wait with the Shark Cannon here. I could have shotgunned it to get rid of his Shaddoll monster in the graveyard, but I decided to wait because he can just... I want to see what he wants to do with Schism first before I make any plays. Okay, so we use this Shaddoll Fusion, which is horrible for us because he gets to send 2 Shaddolls to his graveyard and activate their effects. Goes into Apkalone. Okay, so our Shizuku, which doesn't do too much, it just makes it take a little bit more damage during the turn. Uses Dragon to target our Shark Cannon in the back row, and then he uses Wendy to special summon a Shaddoll monster from the deck and face down defense. So we chain the Shark Cannon here. And the reason I chained the Shark Cannon here is because I feel like he's out of Shaddoll targets, because he already went into Apkalone, his Construct is banished, and his Winda is banished. So, like, what other powerful Shaddolls can he go into at that point? Okay, so there goes our Shark Cannon. Didn't matter because we just chained anyway. Okay, so we lose Shizuku, and then we don't have any follow-up because Rei got banished on our first turn, and so we have no access to her. So we're going to have to improvise without Shizuku. Okay, use multi-roll, add the Engage. Luckily we have the Invoker, so now it's time to make some plays with Invoker. Okay, so we send Invoker with multi-roll, and we do this so that we can guarantee that we can get draws and searches with Engage, because he might have Ash in his hand, we don't know. It's a one-off, but we don't really lose anything from putting Invoker in the graveyard because of how Invoker works, so this is a safe play to make here. So we use Invocation, get rid of his Goblin in the graveyard, and this is great. We've been consistently able to banish threats from his graveyard, which is good. So we can't use them for fusion targets or Monster Reborn or something like that. Go into Makaba. And Invoker back to the hand. And now we have Dino Wrestler Pankratops, and now we can start doing some stuff. So going with Pankratops, we attack into his Apkalone, but his Apkalone cannot be destroyed by battle, so we just did that to get 100 damage off because he halved his life points to 4,000 with his Solemn Judgment activation. So we just want to try and chip away at his life points as much as possible while we can. Then we use Pankratops, get rid of his Shaddoll Schism. so he doesn't have access to it, just in case maybe he does have another Shaddoll fusion, we don't know. Now Shaddoll Squamata, when it flips up, you can target one monster on the field, destroy it. I could choose not to destroy it here because we would lose our defense, our protection, if he destroys it. And our life points are somewhat low, and he has a monster that's just as strong as our Makaba right now. So I decided to make the safe play and negate the effect with Makaba, so that we have better defense up on the field. This also banishes another Shaddoll, so that's good for us. In phase 2, set 2 back row and pass. So you got the Hornet drones. We have this set here for defense, and then we have the Jar of Avarice so that we can get Kukari and stuff back into our extra deck. So he Kaijus though, which is very unfortunate. So it means he's probably going to go for game here. He has branded opening, so we now realize that it's Shaddoll and Despia. So he does the standard Despia plays. He drew really well here because he had access to a Luber, and then he had a Tragedy in the hand to send. Then he adds the Dramaturge, adds the Theater of the Branded. So he's able to do some big moves now. We activate Jar of Avarice early because our life points are somewhat low, and in case he decides to go into Masquerade or something, I want to make sure that we're not just taking life point damage for no reason. And there's no point hiding this because it doesn't look like he has back removal. We need to try to do what we can to protect our life points. So we had all these powerful cards from the graveyard back to our deck. So we get the Shizuku so that we can get a search. We get the Kagari so that we can recycle stuff. Alistair, Mekaba, and Pancratops, those are all powerful cards. He had a Cross-Out Designator, which doesn't really do a whole lot for us right now. So goes into Quiritis. So yeah, he's definitely going for game here. Gets out Dramaturge. So he takes out our Kaiju. So it was a good thing that we set our Hornet drones here, because if we didn't, it would have been game. He attacks with these two for 5,500 and we lose. So I get out a Sky Striker Ace token to block the Dramaturge's attack, so we don't die this turn. We activate multi-roll and get back the Hornet drones. We can actually use it because we have our powerful Sky Striker Link monsters back in the extra deck. Okay, now we have to... We're in a really bad position right here because we're only at 1,400 life. He has a bunch of powerful monsters out, and he has the Theater, and he can use El Shaddoll App Cologne to recycle one of his fusion spells from the graveyard. So we really have to do something crazy here to survive. So watch what I do here. I'm going to do some really convoluted plays, and it's going to get us out of this situation. So we top decked Ghost Ogre, so we're going to use our resources accordingly. First of all, I use multi-roll to attempt to send my Hornet drones to the graveyard. Then I chain Ghost Ogre. And what this does is it gets the multi-roll off the field because we don't really need the effect right now. And that allows us to have no face-up cards in the field so we can activate Lightning Storm. Okay, so now we're going to activate Lightning Storm, take out all his attack position monsters. He has branded opening, so he just banishes that, and we only take out the Dramaturge. Now we use Jamming Waves, we target our own Hornet drones so we can pop one of his monsters. And we chain the Hornet drones so that we can get a Sky Striker Ace monster out. So we pop his Quiritis, and then into Gokari we go. Our Engage is banished, but it's okay, we didn't want it here anyway. We want the Afterburner so we can take out his monster and then take out his Theater. And just with a few plays like that, we were able to completely wipe his field. Then he goes into a Luber. And his Luber play is effective here because negating our Kagari means she goes down to 1,500, so we can't beat over his Luber. That's okay because we put Shizuku in the extra deck, so Shizuku's effect will allow her to beat over a Luber, and then we'll be fine. So he adds the Shaddoll Fusion to his hand and sends the El Shaddoll Fusion because Shaddoll Fusion is a better card to have. Allows him to special summon from the deck. So I take out the Aluber, set the cross out, and now it's pretty much top deck wars. So let's see what we can do. Okay, banishes the Tragedy, sets the Theater. And he top decked Brandon red, which is crazy. That's a crazy top deck. So we know exactly what he has in his hand. He's going to have the Theater here. He has a Luber, and he has Shaddoll Fusion. So what's he going to be able to do? And unfortunately for him, it looks like he was out of plays. Because he wasn't able to search anything off of a Luber. And with only a Luber out, he wasn't able to fusion summon any fusion monsters. Because he only has one monster available to him. Okay, so we top deck Feather Duster. We use it right away to get rid of his Theater. So he can't make some sort of silly comeback with Masquerade or something. Take out his Aluber. Now all he has left in his hand is Shaddoll Fusion. Let's see if he can do something. He's able to set a monster. Now this is unfortunate for us. Okay, we top deck Maxi, which is great, but we don't know what this monster is. It could be another Shaddoll with a powerful effect, so I sat here thinking for a little while, deciding if I should attack into it or not. At the end of the day, I decided I should attack into it, because we can't risk him getting two monsters out, because he's probably going to be able to make some kind of extra deck play with two monsters. So we go into Shizuku, and it was just a Ghostborn and Moonlit Chill bluff. Now normally you wouldn't be able to beat over it, but thanks to Shizuku's effect and us having a bunch of spells in the grave, we can beat over it, so that protects us for another turn. We just have to hope we can outlast this guy in the top deck war here. Top deck's nothing, which is great for us. So now we can swing in. Now I decided to play it safe here. I could go for the Witch of the Black Forest normal summon swing, but that's not game. Because she only has 1100 attacks, we'd just be going for 2600, so that would leave him at 200, so I just decided to play it safe. I go into Shizuku, attack for 15, guarantee game next turn, and then I set the Witch, so we have some defense. Because the only card that we have here is Crossout Designator. That doesn't really do very much for us defensively. Unless he just happens to have a card that we have. Okay, so normal summons Zoodiac, so now I'm thinking, wow, he's also on Zoodiac. Which makes sense because it's a one-card engine. So we activate Maxi right away, force him to try to make some plays to break our board. Goes into Borbo. Now is he going to is he going to attack directly here? Yep, he decides to. Doesn't do any damage because we have Shizuku out. Goes into check a 9. It's pretty obvious what he's doing here. He's going to go for a Zeus line. Now he's pretty much forced to play into Maxi here, because if he doesn't, we're just going to take him out next turn with our cards, pretty likely. So he goes for the back Zeus play. Adds a bunch of cards to our hand. And he thought for a while here, but decides to immediately activate the Zeus. I chain Crossout Designator because we're actually in trouble, because we can't do anything about his Zeus. Our Shizuku is not going to be able to give us a Ray flow, because Ray has been banished since the beginning of the game. So we'll get a float off the Witch, but we need to really make some risky plays here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate Crossout Designator in response. I'm going to get rid of a useless card from our deck, in this case Joel and Lockbird, because it does literally nothing for us right now. If he has Max C in his hand, we have an Ash for it, so we don't need to worry about countering our opponent's Max C. We just need to get something that doesn't immediately help us out of our deck, and Joel and Lockbird is one of those cards. Because with our current hand, we don't have anything that can out his board. So it's a good thing we shuffled the Pancratops back in, because we can use the Witch, add one monster 1500 or less defense, and Pancratops has 0 defense. So now we have something that can out his board. We top deck Monster Reborn, which is exactly what we need. Special summon Pancratops. Opponent tries to chain. Opponent uses. He doesn't try to chain. He uses Zeus immediately after the summon, hoping that I wouldn't chain the Pancratops, but of course I chain the Pancratops and get rid of his Zeus. And then we activate Monster Reborn. Go for Kagari, just so Kagari can get the last hit in. Okay, she's the real boss monster of our deck here. We could use the effect to return something, but I decide not to. I don't want to risk any silly shenanigans happening in his hand. We know he has his Gamma is banished, but I don't care. I'm taking 0 risks here. I'm just going to go in. 2400, and that's a win. So that was a fantastic match. It was very tense when I played. It was tough to play, especially when I had to use Ghost Ogre to pop my own multi-roll and try to wipe out his field. We had to do some really non-standard stuff there, but it was a really good match. We ended up barely winning it, but it had some great back and forth, and it's a really intense situation. So I hope you guys enjoyed the match as much as I did, and I'll see you guys in the next Master Duel video.